Hello, welcome to today's webinar, 6 Reasons to Use Pre-Built Data Center Infrastructure Management Connectors. My name is Mark Gatos. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Enlight Software. And if you're not familiar with Enlight Software, Enlight is a dedicated software company. We're on the 11th generation of our product. We've been developing it for over 15 years now. We really help organizations manage their computing infrastructure. Our software helps them do their jobs more efficiently, more quickly, more efficiently. And we support organizations from very small to hyperscale companies you're very familiar with. And we're very easy to do business with, and as a result, we have a 98% customer retention rate. So that's a little bit about Enlight Software, but let's jump into why you want to use pre-built connectors with your data center infrastructure management solution. So if you look at the Enlight infrastructure management portfolio, we have a variety of solutions: Asset Optimizer, Energy Optimizer, System Utilization Monitor, Asset Explorer. These all sit on top of a machine learning platform that captures data and analyzes it. Now, we capture a great deal of information that is valuable to be synchronized with a variety of other IT systems, such as change management systems, CMDBs, virtualization systems, building management systems, BMSs. And so we provide a communications framework with pre-built connectors to many of the systems over on the right-hand side, many of the brands you're familiar with. And why do you want to do this? Well, there's a lot of information that's valuable inside the DCIM solution that would benefit from being synchronized into these other systems. And not only are you increasing the value of the Enlight solution, but you're additionally increasing the value of those other IT systems. Here's a list of many of the connectors that Enlight provides out of the box. And as you can see, they go across a wide variety of different systems. What they all have in common is that they benefit, and Enlight benefits, from synchronizing information so that the information inside these systems and the information inside Enlight is constantly being updated and shared in a bisynchronous fashion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, before I get into why you want to use pre-built connectors, I'm going to talk a little bit about why or what specific connectors most customers use, the most common ones. So one of the most common ones is connecting Enlight to a change management system. And the whole idea here is you have an ITSM system like a ServiceNow, a BMC, HP, Cherwell, Avante, there are a variety of them. And changes are being submitted, but without a DCIM solution, you just pass the request down to the data center and you don't know really what's going on, and are the changes completed, how far are they along, how much time do they take. By tying the Enlight Data Center Infrastructure Management solution into the change management system, you get a seamless handoff between those two systems. When changes are requested and approved, they're automatically submitted into the workflow of Enlight and then processed and continually updated as to where those processes are and how far along they've gone and how much time they take. So the key is you create full transparency between the change management system and the actual changes occurring down on the data center floor. This increases operational performance and increases the overall transparency an organization gets of that entire flow. Another very common place where Enlight is synchronized into other systems is to synchronize it into a change management database. In this case, the Enlight solution is really providing a real-time view of the logical changes within IT and the data center and synchronizing them up into the CMDB. So this gives full visualization on the assets that are changing. Often when CMDBs are implemented, they start becoming inaccurate immediately because changes are occurring that are not being synchronized. With a pre-built connector between Enlight DCIM into the CMDB, you're automatically making changes, and vice versa. Any changes occurring on who the owners are or other particular items, CIs in the CMDB are synchronized down to Enlight. You choose which ones you want to synchronize, of course, which attributes, but ultimately the goal is to make sure that the CMDB is accurate with what's happening in the data center floor and vice versa. And this again enhances the change management process, and it really reduces the time that it takes for anybody to perform their job that is dependent on an accurate CMDB. If you go to the CMDB and it says a particular asset is in a particular location and it's not there, they then have to fumble around and try and figure out where that asset is. By synchronizing this information, individuals dependent on that information being accurate can do their jobs in a more streamlined fashion. Another common area where customers of Enlight buy pre-built connectors to tie into other systems is to tie into virtualization solutions, whether it's VMware or Microsoft or Citrix or Oracle. But the key here is by tying into the virtualization system, you see what particular applications and workloads are running on which particular physical devices. This gives you a better understanding of the impact of planned changes because you're not just looking at hardware, you're looking at the virtualization layer and the workloads that are working there. You can plan better changes you want to make in the data center. You can see what risks there may be to critical applications by getting a map between the physical and the logical and those workloads. You have a full transparency and can make better decisions to prevent downtime and basically to have a better idea of how you want to manage that physical infrastructure. And another area where customers will buy pre-built connectors to tie DCIM into those solutions is in building management solutions and BMS systems. And the whole idea here is it's sort of the reverse of tying into virtualization. You get an end-to-end power chain mapping, alarming, and alerting, and you can do capacity management based on space, power, cooling, and assets, and have a better idea of how that underlying infrastructure supports your physical assets within the data center. This allows you to map power and cooling chains, and you can do auto allocation of IT assets based on the available power and thermal, as well as according to the security policy as an organization wants to follow. So that sort of hits the main sort of connectors. I wanted to highlight the four main areas, but then the real question is, why wouldn't you just create your own interfaces? Why wouldn't you build your own integration into these systems? And we'll talk about that now. So now that you've decided you'd like to tie into these other IT systems between your DCIM solution, a lot of times we get the question, why would I buy a pre-built connector rather than just developing an integration on my own for our organization? And the answer really has to do with these sort of bullets, and I'll touch on all of them. Lower total cost of ownership, flexibility, access to new capabilities, business continuity, security reasons, and operational hygiene. And I'll touch on each of one of these, but this is the summary of why to buy a pre-built connector rather than hack your own integration for your given system. So one of the main reasons why you want to buy pre-built connectors is that in the long run, it's a lower total cost of ownership than creating your own custom integration that you have to create, test, maintain over time. Over time, it is a much lower total cost of ownership by buying a pre-built connector. A lot of organizations will just look at the initial cost, but there's more than that. There's the additional costs associated with keeping the APIs upgraded, also with custom coded integrations. All costs are owned by the end user. So if there's any change to those interfaces, you have to deal with them yourself. You have to go in and make the changes, assuming the same developer who created them is still around. And changes tend to manifest themselves at least once a year. So with pre-built connectors to a variety of different systems, so when you buy a pre-built connector to whatever system you're tying into, Enlight is taking all the ownership, taking all the costs of maintaining any changes occurring on the Enlight side or on the other side with whatever IT system you're tying into. Could be ServiceNow, could be HP, could be BMS, Could be any of those virtualization vendors. Again, Enlight takes full ownership. The bottom line is that there'll be a lower total cost of ownership if you buy a pre-built connector. So the second thing you get with a pre-built connector is more flexibility. You don't know what business processes you're going to want to implement in the future. And so you're going to want to make changes to those processes inevitably. And so you go in and you make changes, and in the worst case, in hard-coded integrations you create, those integrations just will simply stop working and really require a programmer to reconnect things while the system is down with whatever engineering costs are associated with making those changes. Whereas when you use an Enlight connector framework, we maintain all those connections. It's not the responsibility of a custom coder, not someone on your team. We take care of all those connections, all those interfaces, so that your systems stay up as you make changes to your business logic. So by using a pre-built connector, you get more flexibility with, candidly, less risk. Related to the last bullet, related to the topic of flexibility, one of the reasons you want to use a pre-built connector is you can access new capabilities of the interfaces as they become available. So many times as new capabilities are introduced, if you've created your own hard-coded integration, you can't make changes to it without additional cost. But by buying into a pre-built connector, as new capabilities, new functions are added to those connectors and to the APIs, you get more value. You can implement those very easily rather than having to go back in and modify custom code. So by creating custom code, you're really limiting the value of that integration over the long term. And again, this has to do with flexibility and the value you get out of that integration. But the key is you want to be able to access those new capabilities as they come online, rather than hard code something in concrete and then have to go and make changes to it. So this is the beauty of using a pre-built connector. As those new capabilities come online, you can decide to use them and add value to your DCIM system. So we've sort of touched on this item previously in our other bullets, but a key fundamental value of using a pre-built connector with a communications framework is business continuity. With a custom code integration, programmers ultimately have to learn how to use the APIs for each application. And each API has its own programming language. And even though there may be standards used like RESTful or SOAP APIs, they all have their own capabilities, schema, transaction rules, and authentication method. And if you create a custom integration, each time there's a change, this will likely stop the integration with the DCIM system. And then there'll have to be changes made, and you'll have some amount of loss of business continuity. Yet, with the Enlight connector framework, the abstraction and low-level interface to the APIs is handled entirely by Enlight. So you have continuous business continuity rather than any type of outage. Again, that's because when you buy a pre-built connector with Enlight, we maintain it, we test it, we take care of changes as they get published by the vendors or by Enlight. The fifth reason you'll want to use a pre-built connector rather than creating your own integration is it increases the security of your system, because web-based APIs typically have a rigid set of rules that define the protocols that allow read and write access. And as a result, enterprise software suppliers include a set of restrictions in those APIs that need to be followed. So by buying a pre-built connector, you don't need to understand that. You don't have to find out about it. You don't have to monitor those changes from the enterprise software supplier. You count on Enlight taking care of that for the connectors that are involved. As a result, if you build a pre-built integration yourself, you're now taking on that burden of how to securely integrate the two different systems. Even if there are changes occurring, you may not be aware of them. So again, by using a pre-built connector, you're hoisting that issue onto the connector, onto Enlight, and we are monitoring those changes, making sure that the right protocols are being used, the right read-write access, the right way of accessing that API. So this is just another way that a pre-built connector, Enlight takes the responsibility from handling those changes, making sure that communication is done in a secure fashion rather than you having to track that yourself. So the last reason why you want to use a pre-built connector with a communications framework rather than writing your own integration is operational hygiene, which is often an afterthought for a busy developer who's just trying to knock out an integration between two systems. So within enterprise class integrations must provide monitoring and auditing of all aspects of the data interchange, including understanding of the types of systems being accessed, the versions involved, and each of the dialogues being attempted. This also means handling error handling and logging mechanisms. And with custom code integrations, you're requiring the programmer to build monitoring and auditing tools to manage error handling and logging functions, which, as I said, are often just left out because they're trying to get their job done as fast as possible. By buying a pre-built connector framework based upon your vendor that you're trying to tie into, the enterprise system you're trying to tie into, you're getting access to documentation, built-in transaction monitoring and auditing, which assures in the long term you can support this connector, you can support this integration to the level, the SLA that you're expecting. And heaven forbid you lose the developer to develop this and maybe they didn't write proper documentation and something goes wrong. You don't have the monitoring, you don't have the auditing or logging to see what's actually transpiring. By buying a pre-built connector, you're heaving that on to Enlight and say, you manage it, you take care of it. If there are any issues, I can turn to you and we can find out what's going wrong because there's built-in operational hygiene into the pre-built connector. I know I provided a great deal of information there in a very short time frame. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to info@enlight.com. We'd also suggest you go to enlight.com and look under resources. There's a lot of information about a variety of different connectors if you're interested in ServiceNow or BMC or HP or VMware. There's a lot of information about our connectors at enlight.com. I would also strongly urge you to go and check out the Enlight Connector Framework versus Custom Code ebook, which goes into a little more of the detail that I covered in this presentation within that ebook. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thanks.